All right. It looks like people entering seems to have slowed down. So I might get the meeting for today started. And as I say that, of course, everybody joins. Let's just let these people in. All right, we'll try that again. So welcome everybody to the eRequesting TDG for 10th of October. We've got a couple of things to go through today. Angus will be helping us out while Michael is away. And we, of course, have Brett on the line with us as well. So starting off today, we will get going with the approval of minutes and the update on actions for the previous meeting. We'll run through our upcoming events. There's a few things coming up between now and the end of the year. And then we'll look through some more of the ballot for comment that we were looking at last meeting. And then we can close out with our next meetings and everything else we need to run through. So we do have an approval of minutes for the meeting from the 26th of the 9th for the e-requesting. And then there's a couple of action items. So they have been circulated online. We'll put out the poll for the approval of minutes. I don't believe that needs a motion or a second, does it?
I'll do it. I'll motion.
Cool, that's motion. All right, a couple more seconds. We'll close that out. 3, 2, 1, done. So for the minutes, we had 18 of 23 in the affirmative, 0 of 23 negative, and 5 of 23 abstaining. Thank you, everyone. A couple of action items still hanging around. We've got send out proposed value set for task.business status binding with Michael Osborne, Andy, Angus, and Marvin. And then there is the proposed value set for task.code for Michael, Andy, Angus, Marvin, and Heath. Are there any updates on those ones, or are they still pending in the background?
I don't think there's been any movement on them, for at least the first one.
No worries.
Or the second one.
Okay, nice and easy. We'll push those over to the next meeting then. And if there's any updates, we'll keep the TDG informed. Upcoming events. There are a few things coming up between now and the end of the year. So the first one is the co-design workshop in Melbourne on the 20th and 21st of November. The Eventbrite link is out. That should have been circulated to everybody. I think it went out yesterday. If you haven't registered and you want to come, please do jump in and grab your tickets. There are limited spots. And this will be the last in-person AU eRequesting Sparked event for a while. Focus areas will be refining scope and planning for the release 1 of the AU eRequesting IG. Steph has put that link in the chat to the Eventbrite as well. And then we'll run through any of the outstanding ballot for comment issues if there is anything outstanding between now and any of the other TDGs that we have. So jump in, grab your tickets. We look forward to seeing everyone there. Here is a QR code as well and some of the details. So Melbourne Connect, I think that's part of the University of Melbourne, and the Eventbrite link there. That is in the chat as well. You can just click on that. Ballot for comment resolution will be with Angus today. He's going to run us through some of the outstanding. I'll drop my screen out, Angus, and you can share over the top if you'd like.
Yep, I guess so. I'm a bit on the hop here, so let me get my screen going.
Sure thing.
Share. All right, just going to see this.
Yeah, that's all good.
Now, I wasn't prepared for today, so I believe we're just going through the green ones and socializing them. Is that your understanding, Brett?
That's a good question.
I think we were just going to go through the ones that have.
Yeah, that we had looked at. Yeah.
And are we voting on them, or are we just socializing them?
I think
they
they
shouldn't-
have dispositions against them that the co-chairs have looked
so
at. So I think we can make decisions
on each.
on each.
And I assume we leave these yellow ones alone for the moment.
Yeah, I think the yellow ones still need.
Yeah.
Yeah, still need work.
Oh yeah, so we've just got about 4 or 5 of them. Okay, so I guess for some context, this is the ballot resolution. So for the ballot, people have put in issues. So if I click on this here, there's an issue that someone's raised. It's my one. And then what has happened is the co-chairs have then reviewed that issue and then come up with a issue resolution. So we decide whether it's persuasive. What's the disposition? Like, is it persuasive? Are we going to do it? Is it a modification? And then what are we actually going to do? And there's some comments about discussions about it. So I guess we start with here, the issue being raised. I think this one was mine. It was. So the issue raised was so this came from Sonic Healthcare. We'd like to request that the patient class, such as inpatient, outpatient, emergency, etc., be made mandatory on diagnostic requests. This data point is used by Sonic today to assist in resolving billing. It is also mandatory to provide in the current HL7 version 2 ORM order messages, the older style. That it's found in PV12 patient class. It's mandatory in the V2 standard, which is linked there. And it's also mandatory in the international V2 standard. So just pointing out that orders today, this is mandatory to provide a patient class. So while we accept the scope of current Spark eRequesting protocols for community requesting, we have already experienced this boundary becoming blurred with Magentis users, specialists whose consulting rooms are adjoined in hospitals. Here, the specialist may place an order for both contexts where Sonic services both. It's difficult and unacceptable to restrict their use to community requests where the only obstacle is the patient class field. We accept there is much more work to do in the encounter data space, such as wards, rooms, beds, much more, yet field patient class is a regional starting point. Maybe contained. So notes here, maybe contained. So there's talking about ways to do it. So if we then go back to the co-chair's position. So it was believed to be persuasive with mod, requires a modification. So it would be modify the cardinality of the base eRequesting service request encounter property from 0.1 to 1.1 to ensure all service requests must refer to an encounter resource. The status and class values are not further refined, but in future, based on implementation experience, we may decide to constrain these broader value sets. So that's talking about the actual values like inpatient, outpatient. So if we just look at the spec, we go to the profile for service request here. It is asking for this for both pathology and radiology. So it's down in the base service request that we're talking about. If we look for encounter down here, you can see currently encounter is 0.1. So you don't have to provide encounter. It is must support. So you're supposedly meant to provide an encounter if you have one, but it's not saying that you must have one in the payload. And if we click through to encounter, I believe we're talking about patient class here. Is that right? Class, yes. Here's the bound value set. Where's the type? Go back to the question.
Key elements.
Patient class. Where is it, Michael? Key elements.
Just click on the key elements tab.
You mean, oh, here. Right, here. So here's the value set it's bound to. If I open this up. it has similar values. So we have like emergency, the ambulatory is effectively outpatient, and we have inpatient somewhere. Inpatient is here. Inpatient, yeah, this is in, I think this is inpatient. So we're not asking for this value set to be changed yet. That may happen in future. All we're asking is that service request changes encounter to 1.1, and we then must have an encounter resource. If you look at its cardinalities, you've got a priority status, like, you know, arrived. So you could say finished. Like if you're just trying to create a sort of virtual encounter because you don't actually sort of have one, even though I'd argue any order for diagnostics actually does have an encounter, even if you think it doesn't. So you'd have to set one of these, and then you'd have to set the class that we just talked about, probably outpatient or ambulatory. You've got to set the patient, and that's it. So at a minimum, we're asking that you have an encounter, it has a status, and it has a class. And that effectively is the request.
Yeah. I think, Angus, we worked out what we're doing. We actually do have a slide with tickets to go through. But let's finish. I think we should finish this one off.
Finish this one off, and then we'll go back to the plan.
Yeah. I think with this too, you'll note there's some broader discussions to be had about how we use AU Core, because we've referenced AU Core patient in our spec. So yeah, there's some questions about how we deal with what the obligations mean and how we define that. So I think that has to play out. I think it says we're going to discuss that at the firework group, and I think we would probably need to do that as to how, because it relates to AU Core and eRequesting and how do those specs work together. So I think we're probably not going to deal with that at this stage.
That's this year.
Yeah.
And
so
I think what Brett's getting at is these obligations here.
Yeah.
Because this is an AU Core resource encounter. If I go at the top, this comes from AU Core. The AU Core already has actors and obligations here, like responder and requester, if you go to the core meetings, which don't reflect into eRequesting. Because if we go back to eRequesting, you see we have obligations that are different. So that we're not really at this stage, it's a problem we need to work through. But I guess what we're saying at the moment is we just want that to be 1.1. The obligations still have to all be sorted out.
And I think that's a fair thing where you kind of say, I know I'm going to need information from this encounter that's we're referring to, and we want to actually reflect that in the having a mandatory reference. So
yes. So does anyone have any questions or concerns about that? Like, I can imagine the concern for some people might be like, I don't have an encounter because I'm it might just be a GP system. I'm not in a hospital. I don't really consider that I have an encounter, but I'd argue the fact that you have a patient sitting with you or on a phone or on a video conference and you're deciding to do pathology or radiology on them, that effectively is an encounter. And in that case, you would just spin up. We're not necessarily saying you have to have a formal encounter in your system, but if you're creating a pathology or radiology order, you need to give us the context for the order, which is this encounter, which is probably finished or, is its status, and it's probably an ambulatory encounter. It's an outpatient. You're not in a hospital, and that's it. We're just asking for you to tell us the context that this order is. In the future, that would be far more elaborate. Like I'm in a hospital and I have all this other information about board beds and wards and everything else.
And that reflects with your V2 discussion. Yeah, that would be what you would do with an ORM message and you would have.
If I go to this standard.
Yeah.
And we go to the PV1. It's loading up on me. DV1 2.
And that'd be required, right?
I guess I'm just
Yeah.
thinking through it a bit. So I mean,
Yeah. Required.
thing.
Required. Yes, go ahead.
So I mean, so you say you've got your placer system there. I mean, that placer system's always going to have some sort of encounter ID, right? Pretty much. So wouldn't must support be adequate? I think is probably where I'm coming from.
No,
I always
no,
go back to the R4, or I always go back to the international standards as well and have a look at those and see what they've set there. But yeah. Anyway,
well, I guess that's my point. Is
yeah.
Like some systems would have a formal encounter, right? Like you go, oh yeah, I've got an encounter ID and I can tell you when the encounter started and all that jazz, right? Especially in hospitals and even community, some people might do that. Like when the patient comes in, they start an encounter. But even if you're very light touch, you're like, oh, we haven't got an encounter. We just sort of meet patients and create pathology requests. Even in that scenario, you have an encounter. You
got some form of ID
in the real world,
right? Yeah.
Well, I'm not even saying you have a key IT key. I just think in the real world, you have an encounter, and at a minimum, we're asking you to give us some information about that encounter so that we know it's different to these more elaborate ones. You just need to tell us, I have an encounter, it's ambulatory, I'm outpatient.
I guess I'm just ruminating over whether that boundary there. So I mean, if you do have an ID, some sort of any sort of encounter ID in your system, and it must support, then you're kind of obliged anyway, right? But you are because it's must support. If you actually have an encounter, then you have to do it. I guess what I'm trying to push harder is just because your system hasn't implemented the idea of an encounter doesn't mean that a pathology or radiologist doesn't have encounter, right? Like, I'm not saying you must implement it in your system, but I am saying that as you create a pathology and radiology order, you must give us some context about this is an outpatient encounter, not nothing. I guess. So, I mean, is there any background on why they would have left it out of or left it as must support in international R4? Is that? I guess it's not the discussion point probably. Maybe taking this out of bounds.
No, that's a fair question. It's a fair question. Yeah. I'm just thinking on the fly because they're making it very flexible. Yeah. David, you had a question?
Yeah, no, it's just confirming, I guess, what you guys are talking about too. And, I guess the way I look at it too, none of this data exists or it wouldn't have existed unless there was an event like an encounter. Yeah, so I guess I'm a little more generic. And if your system only collects the request for the diagnostics, there has to be some underlying, meeting with the patient for it to make happen. So I guess what I'm trying to make sure I'm clear about too is that although it's called patient class, is it really about the patient or is it about the encounter, right? Because in this encounter, I was an inpatient, but in this other encounter, I was an outpatient. So the values change depending on the event that's going on. So I'm sort of wondering, is it descriptor of the patient in the event? So, and I would think that, most people should be able to come up with the context. I was just curious about, there was a pretty big list of values though. Well, was it like about 20 of them or so?
There is, compared to the V2 one, I had up here for a second, like in the old world, we have this table, that list there.
All right, well, that's,
whereas in the fire world, we have this list, which is a little bit longer.
Right. So to say that, what's that one? Field. Oh my goodness. A patient encounter takes place outside.
Yeah. I think
out in the field. Oh, out in the field. Okay.
Yeah. And as we made comment in it is we think through implementation, we might want to refine this, but I guess this point is just about, we want something. We want one of these. And down the road, we might start going, I don't know, field has no relevance in Australia. I'm not saying that's true, but that's a latter decision. So,
no,
but I'm just trying to get past jump the fence as to we don't want nothing.
Yes, no, I believe, I would hope that most systems can recognize why the patient was visiting or how the patient was being looked after, I guess is ultimately what we're
Yeah.
talking
And
about.
in my mind, for those people who are going, but we don't record that, we don't have that, then to me, you're just creating a default. You create an encounter. You make your best choice. You're probably ambulatory, right? A comprehensive service of healthcare provided in a healthcare facility. You're probably that, but you might not be. You might go, oh no, this was like where a online phone. Great, then set it as phone. I can't think of a world where there's nothing, where they go, no, I can't do any of these because I do not have an encounter. It's like, how can you not have an encounter?
All right, I'm with you.
Yeah. Andy.
I was just going to say that, for instance, our systems don't natively carry an encounter as a clinical information object. So I think we just got to be careful here that just because two different requests reference separate encounters, you can't assume that they're actually not the same encounter. So the one thing is to use it to carry things like ambulatory, which I'm absolutely okay with. I think we just got to be careful about implying additional semantics that the encounter must represent a unique representation of one particular encounter between a clinician and a patient, because what we might do is at the beginning of the consultation, we create a diagnostic request, and there, yes, we put in an encounter and we link it to an encounter, and at the end of the consultation, we create a second diagnostic request, and it's actually linked to another encounter that happens to also say ambulatory, and that's fine. So it will meet the obligation, but you can't imply that from that perspective, additional semantics about the nature of the encounter and the relationship between encounters.
So yeah, I would have thought that's implied in the identifier. Like if you give me an encounter object with no identifier, all I can say, is this ID, and maybe that order has the same ID, but I can't imply a lot. Like if identifier was populated with something like encounter number, and it was the same on two, then I can make the inference.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable if the identifier is filled in, but yeah, because we're certainly not implying that you must do that.
What about Andy? If the ID, so what if I get 5 diagnostic requests and they all happen to have the same encounter ID?
They're the same resource, so that's fine. Like they're all linking to the same resource, so it is the same encounter. That would be an extraordinary effort to carry the same resource reference and somehow be implying they're different encounters. So I think you're quite reasonable to do that. Like the situation I'm kind of more referring to is I'm just going to invent a new encounter to carry ambulatory, and that's the only semantics you can read from it at that point.
Yeah. Okay. So Brett, what did you want to do here? Do we do a vote? Do we go back to the old plan?
Well, the only thing I think to consider is if you want to make this field mandatory or not, right?
Yeah, this really.
I don't think we're considering what's in the content.
This is
as such. Yeah.
As per the resolution description, modify the cardinality of the base service request encounter property from 0.1 to 1.1 to ensure all service requests must have an encounter resource. And as we said here, the status and class values are not, I think it's meant to say, require no further refinement, but in future, based on implementation, we may decide to constrain. So really, it is this. We're voting on this and nothing more than this, because class is already 1.1 as a property on encounter, and we're kicking the value set down the road. It's suitable now and maybe improved later.
And are they saying is that we don't, if I don't have an encounter, full stop, because that last line, right?
This last line?
This one. Oh no, above reference to an encounter resource. So in the first paragraph up there, yeah. So the last little bit must reference an encounter resource. So is the argument saying that, we don't actually, I don't have a encounter object in my payload, and that's why I can't reference one, and they're worried about creating one to fulfill the context.
Yeah, I think I'm saying the payload that goes on the wire to the from A to B, from the placer to the filler, that the filler, it wants an encounter every single time. Encounter resource.
And the filler at this moment is only saying, look, I got this request, I don't know where it came from.
Yeah, we're not saying the filler must now store in its system an encounter resource. We're not saying they don't, they could, but they could just spin one up for this, new one for each request at a minimum.
What you're more referring to, Angus, here is that you want to make the class mandatory. And in order to make the class mandatory, you need to make the container of the class mandatory. And so we carry that. Yeah. The only other thing we've got to be, I guess aware of is that we are making the AU Core encounter mandatory, which means the obligations associated with AU Core encounter must be well understood, that they don't create additional burden from a diagnostic requesting perspective that beyond which we actually want. And secondly, that obviously if there is a change to AU Core encounter and we're referencing it, we are going to carry all of those obligations into requesting.
And I think that's what the further discussion is really with the firework group and so forth, is to work out what does it mean and how would that impact everyone.
Because everything you just said also applies to patient. We refer to patient core. Exactly. So if they suddenly decide patient cores must have eye color, then we have to suck that up. Same problem. But I get hand up. I guess this is not trying to address that problem. We're really at a business level just saying we need the patient class, so you must give us the counter with the class in it. It's going to have knock-on effects through the IG as per this point here. Steph?
Yeah, Angus, so the change request is actually asking for that reference, so reference.reference to be populated, so to be cardinality 1.1.
Yeah,
if you want the encounter resource.
We're asking that value, the reference, this reference. So that one there is 1.1 already.
Yeah, already.
We're saying this needs to be 1. You must have an encounter 1, and it must have a reference 1 to an encounter resource.
Yep. Sorry, I missed that the reference is already 1.
Yeah, this trips me up too. I always think that is the reference, but really that's just the object, and then that's the physical reference.
Yep.
Yeah, so even though there is an obligation on it, it's not guaranteed to be there, right? Because if you don't support it, you wouldn't fill it in necessarily, but you want to make sure it's always filled in.
Yeah, exactly. As it is now, I may get no encounter because they don't think they support one, and this is optional, so they don't provide one. I'm pushing back saying there is always, in the real world, there is always an encounter. You need to tell me about it.
Well, I would be happy to move to accept that.
I'm happy to second it.
Great. I don't know if I can from this position. Okay, so if we go to thank you, Stuart.
All right, I'll just put that on the screen now. Sorry, Angus, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yep, so there's a vote on the screen. So we're voting on this text here, really, and really it comes down to we're voting on that. So affirmative votes, negative votes, and abstain votes. Thanks.
All right, seems to have calmed down. So we'll close that off in 3, 2, 1. Get your votes in. Cool. So the motion has passed, and for the minutes, it was 19 of 31 in the affirmative, 2 negative, and 10 abstaining.
Now, do I need to record? Is that recorded in the notes? We don't need to write that here or anything.
No. Brett.
It should be minuted if anyone wants to take the minutes.
We don't want to minutes.
Oh, thank you, Christy.
Thank you. Okay, now you said, Brett, there was slides. Do we want to? Do we need to
Certainly
go back to
are.
that mode? To that mode? Do I need to stop sharing then?
Yeah, Stuart, do you want to do it?
Yep, sure thing.
I can still talk
Lovely,
to them.
thank you.
So
Yes, we do
I'll come
actually
back up
have a
to this
set.
slide as well.
We actually had a plan that we didn't follow.
Yeah, I was thinking when I irking feeling when I logged in this morning that am I running this meeting?
So I think we're going to go backwards to timelines.
Yep.
I don't know who's meant to be running this part, but I don't know, Steph,
Yeah, I think we were meant
Yeah.
to go to slide 10.
Oh, okay, let's just do that then. Let's do the tickets. All right. So we can go down this list if we can.
Okay,
Click
so
through. Yeah.
can you click through in this slide deck?
Is that possible?
There we go. Yep.
Oh yeah, success.
Okay, so this was.
So we're going to have to cross-reference onto the triage page because there's no commentary.
No, there's not much there.
747. 718.
Stuart, would you like me to share screen?
If you've got the triage page handy, that
Yep.
would be great.
Yep, I do.
No, that's awesome stuff. Thanks. We're going to have to read the ticket anyway.
Okay. All right, so 47188.
Requisition assigner and display should be optional. Okay. So can we?
Do we want to look at the
Can you bring up the
description?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the requisition assigner and display should be optional. Currently, requisition, which is our group identifier, it's the effectively maybe the barcode number, although that's a bit early to say that, but it's something like that. Currently, the requisition uses the AU local order identifier profile, which has an assigner and a display as mandatory, assuming system URIs are properly structured and unique. The need for a mandatory assigner is not necessary. Recommend changing the assigner and assigner display 0.1. So maybe if you just go to the eRequesting spec, I'll just go look at this property. You go to, it's called requisition, I think. Yep. So see how it uses the profile. Sorry, it's up the top. Oh, sorry, it stretches all the way down there. Yeah, sorry, you're ahead of me. Yep. So you can see the assigner is 1.1 and it wants a display. And what was the other thing they said it had? Assigner and there's two properties there. Or was it just the tree?
Yeah,
it's just the display, isn't it? It's
that profile is coming from AU base. So if you do click on the AU local order identifier, yeah, there you'll end up in AU base, and that's where the
to be clearer.
Simple, it's easier to see. Yeah.
Okay, so we're saying that you must give us one of these, and what they're pointing out is because the system is 1.1, system URI, they're like, well, that's key, but why do we then have to give a display name of the assigner? So this is a bit like, I don't know, an order is created by Queensland Health, or, not to pick anyone, and they're going to give you an order number 12345. It's going to have a system that might be something like queenslandhealth.com/fire/systems blah blah order identifier. And this is then saying you must also have a display that would be sort of human readable, something like Queensland Health Order Identifier. And the change request is saying why must we give this human Queensland Health Order Identifier tag when you have the system which uniquely identifies the order? So, Andy, you comment?
I think Sanjeet has assumed that the assigner and the system are actually related.
The same.
and that is not always the case. So you may very well be a certain kind of sub-brand of a bigger organization, and so the system is actually assigned to some larger namespace, or is being extracted from a larger namespace, but you as the party that is assigning that identifier is actually more detailed and completely different than that associated with the namespace.
Which in V2 is the difference between the assigning authority and the assigning facility. You could say the assigning facility was Hands Public Hospital, but the assigning authority was Queensland Health. And so I think what you're saying here is the system might say this is a Queensland Health order number, but the assigning display might say Cairns Hospital. So you went and saw Queensland Health, but it's that particular one that assigned it to you from the pool of Queensland Health order identifiers. The difference you're making?
Yeah, I really I think this whole profile was kind of invented in some time ago in AUBase to kind of support the idea, and it was discussed about having some way to get some information about the assigner. However, like, I think this group would be a good one to say what should or should not be in this particular profile, because obviously your main business is orders. So yeah, I think this is something, you can set the standard as to what makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, it is, from our point, it is something where we would, for instance, have the assigner as a particular practice, and then have the namespace as actually the broader Magentis identifying namespace.
Is there a problem? Is Sanjeev pointing to a problem where, for some reason, I have the identifier and its system, but I don't know who the assigner was? I just have ID in a system because I'm sort of a intermediary somehow, and I really can't tell you who assigned this. You really, what you're asking me to do is to somehow invent from the system some human phrase, which I can't do. I'm wondering if that's, I'm not speaking from that being my problem, but I'm wondering if that's a driver for this.
The problem, if we wound it back to optional and must support, would be there would always be an assigner. So it's not like you can't have an assigner. And this is more around the creation of it, the creation of the identifier. You would always, whatever was doing it would always have some known string to say, oh, I know. If you don't know who you are, it's kind of weird. So then we would have to take it back. You'd have to make it not must support to make it completely optional.
Yeah. What, dare I say, what if you're turning V2 orders into fire orders, and so you're just getting a place a group number? Does it have? It probably doesn't tell you who the assigner was. May do. Look, I'm in the camp that it's nice to have. Like, it's nice as implementers to go, oh, that's one of those identifiers. But I don't know if it's mandatory.
Yeah, so like I think the question is like, I guess from eRequesting group's point of view, would this be better off not being mandatory and you could put a must support on it in your
Yeah,
own profile, right? That's another kind of option where you could say, yeah, we really like your populate, but don't have to.
but is it, what is it now? Is it, oh, no, it's
It's
you must,
mandatory.
isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
guess just must support 0, 1. It's almost the opposite of our encounter one, right? It's nice to have, but it's not, the system's not going to fall down if you can't give me one.
How costly is it to populate assigner.display with a meaningful display name? That's the point of it, because you can't assume that all system URLs will be well structured and unique, and their technical identifiers are separate from the user interface and what assigner.display in principle is meant to be for.
I take the only thing I take Angus's point where I've got an existing V2 system where that's just not a thing, which
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure would be pretty common.
But even there, Brett, you're going to have,
Yeah.
you know, you have the placer group number, right? You're going to have the number at a minimum. You know where the message came from. So
Yeah,
just
facility.
fake it and say, oh well, this is a number from them. Even better, you've got the number and you've got a namespace ID, universal ID type, and therefore you've got now you've got everything you need.
Yeah.
But there is that initial case where you just got a number in a V2 message, and you're like trying to make, you already have to make a system, right? So you have to. At a minute, there's no getting out of the fact that you've got a V2 message, you've got a number, and you have to create a system, right? And if you have to go through the mental pain of creating a system, then you kind of, I feel like you're pretty close to be able to give it a human name.
Because, like, I mean, you'll have a sending facility or whatever as scoping the whole thing, right? Anyway, in the message, yeah. So you
but it's probably not 100% true to say the person who sent me the message is the assigner of the order number.
No, but in the absence of any other information,
they
effectively are, right?
True. Yes, you're right. In the absence of anything else.
I'm happy to make it optional must support. I don't know whether that's going to have, for the use cases I can think of, it would be the equivalent of mandatory in terms of actually the realizing of it. I understand, as you say, there are maybe some edge cases where you're doing transformations from other systems or something where you has maybe struggle with the mandatory, but the must support has just become something that the validation of its semantics are going to be more dubious.
I also think it's fair. Is it not fair to say that why does the receiver need it? Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to say this is the Queensland Health order barcode? Like, who cares? It's a number that you scan and retrieve an order from. The order itself is going to say I'm from this organization and what. Like, do I really need to know a human name for the barcode type? Like how often do you see a barcode and above the barcode it says this is a Queensland Health barcode, or this is just a number.
Given the lack of clarity we do have around the future of barcodes, all of the tools we can have to support their transition would be useful, but I'm not going to die in the ditch on this one.
Yeah.
I
got some other potential noise, but it as the group kind of responsible for defining requesting in so many ways, do you think this profile should live with the eRequesting TDG, or at least they should be responsible for it?
I think as we get further in the weeds of barcode semantics and all the pain that's going to be there, I think it inevitably because there.
Yeah, you see, it lives in AU base at the moment because there was nowhere else to have it live before that, and I think it also it will be used in reporting context as well as being something that comes back with reporting. Yeah. So it'll be used.
Yeah.
So it kind of needs to live in a place that's accessible by multiple specs. But I'm just kind of considering how we manage some of this stuff, because like in theory, like if you look at the fire spec, different groups are responsible for different resources, right? So we could have a similar situation with AU base where we go, this is a profile that is managed by the eRequesting TDG. Because in reality, the fire work group's not that you're probably the people that know the most about it. So it's probably better that way. So that's just more of a management question. But I think at the moment, like, yeah, whatever decision you said, we will probably go along with it in the fire work group, because you guys need to use it. And then, yeah. So I think it's more of a call for you to make about how you think it should be.
Look, I'm personally happy with the change that we make it optional.
If you did want to, proceed with that, I mean, the procedure at the moment would be, say that the group has agreed to that, take a vote, send that up to the firework group with a request to say we want it changed. Yep. And we would, that would probably.
I guess the only other angle,
yep.
the only other angle that sort of popped into my head was this idea. You said that there's going to be some reporting done on the data. So do we have any examples of what kind of reports they say they're going to use the data for?
So it's kind of the round tripping eventually. So you've placed this order with this order number on it, and then later we're going to give bit back to you pathology reports and diagnostic imaging reports, and somewhere in that report we're going to say this is in response to order number 10.
And you know who to send it to, because they're the requester.
Yeah, that stuff's other metadata in the request, right? Like the practitioner role, the practitioner who requested it, like, so that's how we know who we're doing it for. We're really just echoing back to that sender, hey, we're giving you this in response to that order. And this is that sort of key identifier that is, one, used to scan to find the order, and then two, echoed back on the outcome of the order, the reports, to go, we're doing these reports in response to this order that we had.
Yeah. And how many orders did you get from that mob? How many did you get from that mob? Maybe. Yeah.
Good count.
Good fun. Yeah.
Yeah, you can count them maybe somehow. It really, it's just a primary key for the order in a way.
Yeah, I can see as a filler we might use assigner. You might store that somewhere, and then you have that extra level of detail against your order numbers. Then you can break them out by assigner if you want.
But you're going to have that. Yeah, we're going to have system, right? So you're going to have a URI that makes will enable you to uniquely group orders by types. But these come from this assigner. These come from this assigner. All you will lose here is a human name. When do you need to tell someone, oh, this barcode is a blah 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 barcode?
Not necessarily, because all you can do is group it by the system applied to generate the ID.
Oh yeah. Because Andy's point about the system and the assigner might be different. Yeah.
So that's not necessarily a logical system. That might be a methodology, right? So it might be GUIDs. You might just say, I've got a GUID.
Yep.
Which gives you no hint at all about who the actual orderer was.
Yeah, you mean the system might be a GUID?
Yeah, exactly. The system might be a GUID. Yeah, so, and it might be any particular assigner that's,
but you're still going to have the service requests. You're not going to lose like the service request came from
as an identifier
for this doctor.
You might not care because you have an actual request that has the details that you need. So I think I think that if I was to proceed with this, I'll just make a motion to request the removal of the mandatory assigner.
Yeah. Am I allowed to make motions here? Being the
you're not the chair, so you can.
Well,
you make a motion.
I motion that we like to go back to Sanjif's go back to disposition on it. Just before I make a motion, I'll better know what I'm motioning. Currently resolving order mandatory. We need the mandatory assigner is not necessary. Recommend changing the And did we have a disposition back in the?
No, there's no current one. Not disposition.
I think, Angus, the thing to do would be to get consensus here, put that into the ticket, and then say this ticket, it's actually an out of scope ticket because it's an AE based change, right?
Yes.
But if you put your 2 cents on it and say, well, we had a consensus vote in the TDG and we want it out, that will come through on the ticket, and then we can get the co-chairs to transfer it to AE base and
Okay, so how about I motion Sanjay's word from the ticket? I think that was fairly clear. We vote on that and then we just put the voting stats in here.
Yeah.
So we're voting on this description here. Currently, requisition uses AU local auditor profile, which is an assigner, and display mandatory, assuming the system is structured properly, which we can assume. The need for mandatory assigner is not necessary. Recommend changing assigner from display 01 to changing assigner to display 01. So I motion that we accept this description.
We got a second?
Do we have a seconder?
Michael?
Michael Osborne has seconded?
Yep.
There we go. Cool. Okay, I'll push that one out. Alrighty, that should be live. Yell out if anybody can't see that.
Who's driving this page? Is it you, Stuart?
Steph.
Me, Steph.
Steph, yeah. So perhaps Steph, can we just in real time put the eRequesting TDG voted on this and
can put it in the ticket and and it'll be minuted too. Better,
ticket
So I'm going to close this one off really quickly, and I'll state for the minutes, and then we can update the ticket in the background. So for the minutes, the motion carries. It was 18 of 30 in the affirmative, 4 of 30 negative, 8 of 30 abstaining.
Yep.
And we've got about half an hour left. How many more tickets do you guys want to try and go through?
Could we make sure that info gets into the ticket, and then the co-chairs of eRequesting have to hand it off to co-chairs of AE base firework group to bring it into that business? Because I'm going to broaden this discussion about whether firework group should be looking after this profile at all and try and offload it.
Yeah, get that on. Understand that.
Yeah, but because in reality, you're the guys that will have more to say about it, in general. So rather than going through this kind of process where we have to refer things, it probably makes sense to make you responsible. We've never done that before, though, so I need to introduce that idea.
Because it's not a resource; it's a profile.
Yeah, it's only slightly complicated because we still have a reporting thing to consider. So it might need to live in AU base, continue to live in AU base, but be under your control, as opposed to just hand it off. As we've definitely handed off stuff to AU Core already with a whole bunch of profiling that they do that we don't have anything in AU base about anymore. So
maybe we need a new TDG called O&O.
Well, then you'd need an O and you'd need your own OG to handle the shared business. who's volunteering for that? Yeah. Oh no, what a great name.
All right, so we got 6 tickets left. Is there a preference for what we want to go through next?
We need to list, yeah. But Steph is doing this.
Steph, I'm just going to jump over to top of you and put the tickets back up for everyone.
Sorry, what was that? I think the next one was For's. Okay, great.
Requisition are optional, so add must support to priority element. Add must support to priority element.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to do.
The second one must support priority element.
Yeah. I think that hopefully is a little more straightforward. Famous last words.
Yeah, I think sounds. Can we click on that? Read the.
We absolutely can.
Sorry, Steph. I know we're asking you to do like multiple things at once.
That's all right. Stuart's got the.
Oh, Stuart's taking over.
The screenshot. Yeah.
Driving priority while Steph updates the other ticket.
Okay, so this one is add must support to priority element on the eRequesting service request. So the priority element on the AU service request should be labeled with must support so the placer system can record the requester's original intent on how quickly the service request should be performed. Cardinality is 0.1 and the terminology binding of request priority is required and should remain. And they've got some ACLA obligations. They're saying the placer populate if known, the filler has to handle it, the server has to handle it, and the server has to be able to populate, and patient access, no error. So maybe just go look at the property on service request profile. This is priority, so we're talking about like urgent. I want this done urgently, or I want this done stat. Priority.
So this is really just recording the place's original intent, yeah?
Yeah, I know when we discussed this before, there's the task, which we haven't even got a profile for yet, also has a priority property on it. So I know we had some discussion about the difference between the service request having a priority and the task telling someone to fulfill that service request having a priority. And the difference between the two contexts. I certainly had the view that the service request is about what the doctor literally wanted. He wanted it urgently. The task may differ from that. Like he might want it done urgently, but for other reasons it's not done urgently, or so they're independent. One, in my view, the service request is sort of like an immutable what the doctor wanted, where the task is more about what we're going to do about it. And therefore, whilst 99.9% of the time you would say if the doctor wanted it urgent, then the task is urgent. I agree with that, but there is a distinction between the two. Maybe we don't do it urgent, even though he wanted it urgent. Did you find priority property?
It doesn't appear to live in here. Does anybody know if it's
go snapshot? Go to the snapshot. It's probably because we didn't change it. Yeah.
Snapshot.
I can see Philip has a comment too.
Yes. Sorry, Philip. Go.
Yeah, and just confirming that the priority that we're talking about here is around the processing of the specimen. It's not related to the collection of that specimen.
That's good. Actually, I don't know.
I don't know if that
it depends what it says in that.
Yeah, I don't know if that distinction's made. All it is saying is the doctor wants you to do it urgently. Now, if you are a responsive system that says we're going to send a phlebotomy nurse out there ASAP, fine. But if that's like, well, we don't collect things urgently, we just do them urgently in our lab. I don't think the spec's trying to split that hair.
Yeah, like the definition is actually, it says nothing about collection or anything. It just says
the level of importance.
How quickly the service request should be addressed with respect to other requests.
So Phil, I think it's in your court. If on
Yeah.
receiving orders that are urgent are going to ASAP send a collector out there, then that's fine. But if you're like, no, we're just going to do it through the lab when it arrives as fast as we can, I don't think this is trying to tell you either way.
Yeah, I don't think it comes with baggage other than it's a prioritization thing. So it's about what do you consider, where do you manage your workflow, and you would prioritize it in your workflow. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess we may eventually need to think about having and disambiguating those priorities, because there's, at least in the hospitals, there's usually two different priorities. There's a collection priority and then a reporting priority. And the collection priority is used to determine, are you going to go through, normal phlebotomy rounds, or does it have to be collected at, immediately, like truly stat or urgent, or does it have to be on a very specific time sequence because it's based on, antibiotics being given or other kinds of things where it's a time study and can't just be on the regular schedule. Whereas the reporting priority is traditionally, how is the lab processing it once it receives that specimen? So is it processing it urgently or not?
I think it's a workflow, like that's a whole workflow management piece about whether you split the request into a collection part and a fulfillment part, or whether you just say the overall request is a high priority and therefore I have tasks that are high priority attached to it, including collection, right? And so if you want to, and that's completely like system workflow dependent, I think. So I think, I don't know if we weigh into that.
Are they things, Phil, that the requesting doctor is going to say to you, I want the collection done straight away, but you can do it slowly through the lab? Or like, is the requester telling you these things?
Yes. So in most EMR, hospital EMRs, I should say, yes, that is happening. Now, I get in Australia, most of our LISs have not had collection modules. So usually all that collection logic has been managed by the hospital-based EMR internal to itself. But when we look at the rest of the world, the LISs usually have collection modules in them. And so that differentiator is being passed directly to the LIS. And you will have, usually if you have a doctor saying, I want it collected urgently, then they're asking for the processing to be urgent. But it is quite different in the routine and time studies, and sometimes people add in add-ons and other kinds of priorities there that can be a little funky. But those traditionally can be quite different, that, I need to send something to the specimen collection module of exactly how it needs to be collected. Is it on regular routine rounds? Is it at a very explicit time? Some of those kinds of things. But regardless of when you collect it and it shows up in lab, the lab is just processing it through its routine piece. It doesn't try to somehow differentiate in that prioritization. So as we're looking at the international context, especially, and it may grow here too, there are two really distinct concepts, and sometimes the LISs, at least globally, will need to understand those concepts differently.
I think you have to split the requests into a collection request if you want to kind of say something about the timing explicitly for that. It's like, because the codes we're using for the service request are fulfill this particular test, right? Which has parts. Yeah.
Right.
So I think, if you want to be explicit, Yeah, the
tests going to community usually aren't that way so much, right? Because they're saying, I want a glucose tolerance test, and then you show up at the draw station, they know that I need to take it over multiple hours, et cetera, right? So it is very different when you're going to a whole different service in an outpatient community setting versus processing internally to the hospital. But theoretically, both use these same, or over time will be expected to use these same resources.
But again, I'm sorry, but we keep circling back and recognizing at least that there's a couple of concepts here. The doctor says it's important, we got to make it happen fast. So pick it up quickly is my collection. And then how fast the lab works with it doesn't sound like he's got any control of that at all. They just, we're busy today, we'll get to it unless there's something special on it, I suppose. So I'm seeing it as two different pieces of data,
Yeah,
totally.
Internal to the hospital, the clinician has a chance to suggest both of those because you may have an emergency department, and I need it collected quickly, and I need it turned around as quickly as possible, right?
Yep. Yeah,
it's a real different.
That's not the same in community. I get that.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a real dichotomy between the two, because like in a Sonic sort of community sort of world, we just have one urgent status, and primarily for us that's urgent through the lab, because we don't go knocking on people's doors saying we need to collect this blood for you now because the doctor says it's urgent, right? We wait for the patient to roll up to a collection center, or the doctor bleeds them in their surgery. Like we don't really expedite the collection, we expedite the request through the lab. It goes through the fast path rather than slow path.
Yeah, so are we doing, but like the doctor's indicating they want the result urgently through all aspects, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I had that view too.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. Phil, and I asked Phil that question, like, did the doctors tell you this? Like, do the collection quick, but I don't care how slow it goes through the lab. And you said yes.
Yeah, it's two separate fields. I can't represent and I've consistently seen that across different systems. In my system, for example, we will default a reporting priority based on a collection priority. You can set that up so that you don't have to make two independent decisions unless you're doing something really unique. That's the part I can't answer for some of the other EMRs, but it is two separate fields that then come out in the V2 messages as two separate details.
Yeah. How does this urgent status work in a V2 message then? So if you get an ORM to do something, is this there's a priority in there somewhere, I can't remember where, OBR somewhere there's a priority, but it's just again something like this, like urgent. That
yeah, I'd have to go look at our specs, but there are two specific fields that differentiate between essentially that collection priority and the reporting priority, in my parlance at least.
That holds true with radiology as well for our system. So there's a request priority and then a reporting priority, so that can be managed in the work list. Yeah.
Right. So explain that, Adrian. So
there's a request priority. So I mean, for the moment, as I feel, I take the task priority because I don't have anything else, I think. And then I hang my request priority off that. But there's also a report priority after that you can put onto the reporting. So yeah, I mean, say you've got hundreds of reports on your work list and you want to prioritize them in a possible environment. Yeah.
But isn't that again just it's flowing through? Like, so you've got an
it's
order
more
and
internal, I would say. I don't think that's exposed on outbound messaging is my understanding. And so we just take in a V2 world, we take that single priority and run the request off that. Yeah. And then the reporting is internal, I believe, that priority. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought from what you're explaining, that's just a flow. Like the order comes in urgent, therefore we mark the report urgent.
Maybe not necessarily. Yeah. So the report might still be routine. Yeah.
So I mean,
it can be. I mean, you can have different. You can have. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm struggling to my mind's trying to work out how fire in itself fulfills request. Like
yeah. I mean, I see that priority hanging off the report resource. When we get to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost see Phil's request is like you've now got, I don't know, two service requests running somehow. One is a request to do the collection. One is a request to do the fulfillment of the order, and they're joined somehow. I don't know how we're going to solve that here now.
Well, there's certainly a pattern where you can put multiple requests in one. I'm sort of Cleb's had his hand up here for a while.
All good.
Sort of.
Yeah.
All good. Speaking for another EMR, something that we have instead of a collection priority is we just allow the requesting physician to pick a date and time that they want collected. Which I know that expands scope and is complicated in its own right, but it's distinct from the priority, and then it still allows that separate reporting priority, that expected like turnaround time and how quickly results come out. And for what this eRequesting is looking at, where it seems to be like it's going to be mostly the community space, mostly outpatient, where the patient presents with the orders electronically, that expected date, that when we should be collecting, is probably not going to be very urgent based on our scope that has been discussed so far.
Yeah, I'd just quickly, that's great. I love another piece of data. And I guess what I'm hearing you say is that it's another scenario because, yeah, it's a scheduling thing. I was thinking about, you go to your GP, they do a swab. How do they get someone to send that off to the lab to get it looked after? Don't know, but whether it could be on a schedule too.
I guess my ask, so I take that point. My ask would be that we need to document that clearly in the specifications of the intended use or the workflow here. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I've been burned a lot in Australia, e-prescribing of, we design it for one use case, e.g., and this is what we were just saying of outpatient community pathology and radiology, and then various tenders and government entities and others don't know that, don't have that history, and then they put it in their tender and require and say you must support it, and you're going, that makes no sense, you can't actually do that. So I'm okay with us saying we're going to focus on that as a strategy, but then that needs to be explicitly there so that when people misinterpret and make an assumption that this should work everywhere, and it doesn't, it's more than just one vendor saying this doesn't make sense, right? For that use case.
Yeah. For this, then, is the goal from today to say for this element, we mean it in this context, we say reporting priority?
Yeah, happy with that. Absolutely. Because it'll evolve, right? We may have other projects, the world will have other projects too. That's fair too.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've always, even though I've struggled with these sort of conversations, I believe it is clear for our technical, for the spec that it is for community, but that doesn't dismiss the difficulties we have, Phil. Like this crossover is going to be a problem all the way through. But just as if we said we're doing hospital, it would be a problem for community. And then if we said we're going to make one profile for them all, we're going to struggle as well. Because then you're going to create all the private labs have to now do all the hospitalisms.
True. So we have to figure out some middle ground or multiple versions for different use cases or whatever. And I'm sure there's a way or will become a way over time because this is not unique to just Australia, to be fair. These differences will occur in many parts of the world because there's a similar dichotomy between hospital needs and community needs, whether that's coming from a hospital or coming from a GP or specialist.
And I guess the way I would sort of even architect, and it's a long running event, isn't it? The event started with its diagnostics and there was multiple events inside it. Can you do this? Can this happen? So how you're processing that whole event there's lots of thinking on that too, I guess.
Yeah, I guess in community, we don't see us owning the collection initiation, where in hospital you do, right? So in community, we don't get orders in and proactively go, oh, this one's urgent, we better ring the patient, we better drive to their house, we better collect the sample, right? We don't do that. We just go, when the patient arrives with the order and we collect the blood, if it's urgent, we're going to do it fast from that point forward. But a hospital's a different scenario. A doctor places an order, and in the instance he's placed that order, collection staff are going, do we need to collect that now? Like, is that...
Yeah, because it's so straightforward for community to show up, there is no real collection priority, right?
No, it's just that do this urgently as soon as you can, and that's as soon as the patient rolls up to have the blood taken.
Gotcha. I can see Arseni has their hand up.
Yeah.
Austin?
Hello, can everybody
Oh,
hear
yeah.
me?
Yes, Ken.
Yeah.
Hi. Asani is my name. I'm a doctor currently working at the TGA, but I've worked both in hospital and in community. And I was just going to sort of second Angus's point about this urgency being in the community versus in a hospital. So you're both actually completely correct. In an outpatient or let's say a GP setting, by ticking that sort of urgent box, it is about the report itself. It's not about getting the patient. That would be a less formalized, please, patient go in today or go in tomorrow, get it done. But it's about receiving that report back either from a pathology radiology perspective, whilst in the hospital, urgent would mean urgent to be collected. And then the expectation is that once it's collected, it will just go into the sort of the rest of the pile for getting reported. So I understand sort of both views, but I guess would it be possible to have, let's say, an urgent tick box or an urgent message, and depending on whereabouts that's actually used, it sort of means something different, and we can accept that? Or would that conflict with the sort of data that we're going to get back and the use cases for each one?
Yeah, so my data management hat would be not to reuse the same thing for both scenarios, but to recognize that they're different things. So there's no confusion.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, would it be better to have then to urgent collection and urgent reporting? But then again, that's sort of extra stress on the doctor, and a lot of the times, both would be what's required. It'd be very rare to ask a patient to have something collected urgently and not reported on, or vice versa. Don't worry about getting it done urgently, but once it's done, I really want it to be reported. I think that's the other issue as well.
Yeah, and I was even going back to the patient in the first place. Hey, come in here. It's urgent that you come in here. That's sort of like urgency number one. And then urgency number two is get it done and collected, and urgency three is report it fast.
I can think of ways you might do it with task, right, where you break the collection procedure and the analysis procedure into two parts of the exercise, but that depends on, that's like system depend, like that's scenario workflow dependent kind of stuff, right, where you consider that they're different things. And like we haven't thought that's true, right? For this high level discussion, we kind of said we want the whole service fulfilled. We want the task is to fulfill the service. And we haven't kind of broken it down into the parts. It is interesting, but I can think of different ways to kind of achieve it with task as well. And that would be very kind of workflow dependent as well, depending on how you thought about your workflow in some ways as well. But that's hard to do. Yeah, generally, yeah.
I saw it as Ansi described it. I was like, it's about the filler's context. Send an urgent request to a community lab. They're going, we'll do it when it arrives as fast as we can. But you send one to a hospital, they're going to go and create workflow about collecting it as fast as they can. Yeah,
because the thing is, the request is actually tasks for internal nursing or someone to do something, right? As opposed to being
we're not restricting that when you get a task to do an order, you can create a whole lot of subtasks, go crazy as you see fit to do a collection of this or that, something else. And I struggle too with the idea that a doctor's going to say, I want this collected urgently, but take as long as you like for the report. Like, is that a thing?
Not often. So not that combination. But usually with some of the other collection priorities and tools, there still is a decision of the reporting piece. So I may need to do a medication drug level, and it needs to be done at a very specific time. So it's not routine and it's also not urgent. It has to be done at an explicit time. And then because I'm making a clinical decision off of that's critical, I need that reported urgently back to me, whereas sometimes it may just be reported back through normal turnaround times because it's in preparation for my next round or whatever. So I think it's not a stat that becomes routine. It's more these routine times that may sometimes or occasionally become urgent.
I think timing covers that, because there's the timing concept in the request, right, which I think gives you some level of flexibility around that.
Yeah, we're running out of time. Talking of time,
See, I
great
told you.
segue. Great segue into
I
running
know.
out of time.
Yeah, it was also that I killed this conversation by saying, "Hey, I think we should be able to get through this easy
This one should be easy." Yeah, that was the fatal flaw.
Yep.
Sorry
so,
for being the difficult one.
The thing is, you want in community, you want to represent ticking the urgent box.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was simple, but Phil's making reasonable points. And to me, I kind of brutally think it's not our scope, but I accept everything Phil said about the scope today it becomes a different thing later. I'm also struggling with, I don't see the easy answer. Like in fire, there's not like, they haven't separated it into two priorities because I think they see it as two service requests, maybe a service request for collection, a service request for the reporting, a service request. Almost three service requests.
Yeah. I think that's how it would be pan out, because you'd kind of go, well, one service request is for a collection, which actually has different people doing it, right, as well, and it's that would have its own priority and its own.
And you'd use the based on. So you'd have a service request and the doctor says, I want this thing done now. And then there's two children, like one's the collection service request for it and one's the reporting service request for it. And they're all based on the primary.
Yeah, assuming you're doing, and this is like so system dependent and like workflow dependent, because it's whether you think that is actually a service request or do you think that's just a task as part of the service request, right? And that's kind of more just how you're implementing. If you think it's kind of internal, you might think it's just a task that's happening inside this single service request. Whereas if you have to kind of split these into different interactions with different systems,
let's park it on Brett's comment and carry on chat.fire if anybody wants to keep going today. If not, then we'll circle back on the next meeting. It doesn't sound like there's going to be enough to make a motion for it today. So we do have some updates for everybody on the ballot for comment. Brett, if you want to speak to this, I think you'd probably be best placed.
I'm just going to go. I don't think this has been updated. Ballot for comment ballot. So
I did update it this morning.
Oh, good on you.
Brett, yeah.
Well, Steph knows better then. So this is where we're at.
We got 55 issues. So this is eRequesting. So you got 55 issues reported by 12 different organizations and 16 different people. They were voted on by 10 organizations and 13 people. We've triaged 71%, so we've sort of done dispositions on them.
Yep.
Reconciliation. 24 issues accounts includes. I'm not sure what reconciliation is.
Yeah.
We haven't applied any of them. The ballot's closed. Period's closed. We're doing this. This is reconciliation that we're doing now, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it's and I think Steph will talk to it. Like these are the ones that that were highlighted by the co-chairs that needed talking about, and I think it's clear that maybe they do. But there are another set which are less controversial, hopefully, that have been put together as block votes. So they're kind of things that people need to consider offline in the block vote. I don't know. Do we have a slide for that one, Steph? Is that the next?
I can jump to slide 11.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So, go.
Slide 11, I think. Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, cool.
So we've just unlocked 2 block votes, so block vote 2 and block vote 3, and I'll send a reminder email out to the TDG after this meeting. And so those should be ready for you to cast your votes.
And I think the general thing is the first one is really just like grammar and spelling and things like that, and the latter one is things that we agree, but they're just not now, like the kicking the can down the road sort of thing.
Yeah, and usually they've got content that is beyond what was in the ballot content as well, so it needs further work. And the procedures on the page, so it should tell you what to do, and if you have a problem with any, this applies to all block votes. If there's a specific issue that you have, like one of the items they have an issue with, you can refer it to Telecon, which means it'll be plucked out to be looked at. for discussion, and you need to put a reason why in there as well. You can't just kind of say I don't like it. You have to actually have a reason and some rationale for having a further discussion on it. So yeah, otherwise vote yes, no, abstain on those.
Yeah. And Brett, just clarify, informative changes are what kind of changes? But they're not technical corrections.
Yeah, usually, because informative changes are usually things, because we break it into substantive and informative. So informative is usually to do with narrative, explanation, and guidance kind of material, and substantive stuff is usually profiles, right? So anything that actually affects what's on the wire. Rules and so if you change must supports or change cardinalities, yeah, that's a substantive change. So yeah, so those ones there are all related to kind of supporting material and content that goes along with the actual spec rules.
Cool, thank you. So the next meeting, so we're currently in the next 2 block votes, as Brett just went through. We will have some more ballot for comment resolution on Thursday the 24th, and then again on Thursday, November the 7th. And then that will move us to the 21st of November, which will be the in-person full day in Melbourne. So again, there are links in the chat for the Eventbrite if everybody wants to grab their tickets, and look forward to seeing everybody there. And then that brings us to the end of today's meeting. So we managed to get there just in time. Is there any final comments from either Angus, Brett, or Steph before we wrap?
I think I'm good.
Nothing from me.
Stop
Perfect. All right. So
Stop
we'll
Brett
call
saying
it
things
there
are
then.
easy.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks,
Thanks,
Stuart, for
everybody.
running the meeting.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.